Hi everyone, I am Radhika. Welcome to my YouTube channel Datazard. In this particular video, we are going to be talking about the DBT analysis folder. This is one of the overlooked concepts in DBT. However, it is really an important concept because there are lots of use cases that can be tied back to this particular folder. So that is why I am discussing this particular concept in this video. And now, without wasting any time, let's get right into it. Now let us start with the question. Suppose that a stakeholder in your business comes to you and asks you like, can you do this analysis for me, or can you check this thing quickly for me? Or taking a particular example from our HR analytics project, they could ask, are we paying employees fairly? Like, is there a gender pay gap present? So these are the questions that can be asked. If you create these questions as SQL files in your models folder, which means you're creating a model, then this would mean that DBT is going to push this into your data warehouse as a model. But the question is, do you really want this to go into your data warehouse? Obviously no, because this is an analysis that you have done for a particular question. It's not something that should go into your data warehouse because we already have data related to this. It's just we are doing an analysis on top of this data. Okay, so we cannot create these as models in DBT. Now you would be thinking, maybe this question could be asked by somebody else, or this stakeholder might come down the line in 6 months of time and ask this again. I will save this as a query. But where should you save this? Should you put this in your Slack so that you have all of these queries in one place? Or you put this in your Confluence, like a repository where all of your different all the data team members can access that repository and put things over there? Is that the right choice? I don't think both of these places are the right choice, because again, if data models change, you would be making changes in the query and sometimes you might forget to come and update things over here. So these queries would become redundant. So what is the best place to put these queries where you're doing some kind of an analysis for somebody? This is exactly what DBT analysis folder solves for us. So what you do is, there is the stakeholder who's coming and asking you to do the analysis. What you do is you write this SQL file and you put this in the analysis folder in DBT. Now when you put it in this analysis folder, it's just an SQL file, but this will not be materialized by DBT when you put it in the analysis folder. So this means it's not going to go into your data warehouse. It will not go into your data warehouse. And also it will not be a part of your production pipelines. So these queries, they will be independent of what happens in your production pipelines, and you will still be able to version control it. You will be able to save these and retrieve these whenever somebody asks the same question. So in this way, DBT analysis folder is helping us to keep everything in one place, which are also version controlled. The most important part is whatever you put in your analysis folder, it will not go into your data warehouse. It will just sit in your DBT. You will have to run those queries independently to get the results for them. Now, some of the use cases as to when you should be writing SQL in your analysis folder is, first is when you have to answer some ad hoc questions. So you're writing some ad hoc queries. So what you can do is you can go into your analysis folder, write those queries over there and re-reference it later on whenever same questions get repeated. Second is when you're doing some exploratory work, like you're trying to find some patterns or trends in the data, then again you can go to the analysis folder, save your queries over there, so that later on if you have to do the same analysis, then you have everything ready and you just have to run those queries. Third is when doing validation, and fourth is debugging. These are kind of similar. When you have to validate things or you have to figure out why some query is not working as expected, so again you can write your queries over here and debug them accordingly. So these were the common use cases for using an analysis folder in DBT. Now let us see some practical implementation. So if you go into your dbt_project.yaml file, you can see that your analysis folder is, this analysis path is the analysis folder. So that is what we have over here as analysis. Now we already use this for some demos. So again, I'm going to create a new file, and suppose that the ad hoc question that the stakeholder has asked us is, can you get me the count for the male and female that are working in the company? This is a very simple question, like you could have just answered this from one of the dashboards, etc. But I just want to give you an example, that's why I'm just using this. I'm sure you all know how to write those complex SQL queries. So for this, what I'm going to do is, when I'm writing the SQL here, I'm going to name this properly. So I'm going to call this as gender count.sql. So this instantly gives me an idea that by reading the name, I know that this will give me the gender count in the data set, so that if anybody else comes into the analysis folder and they see this gender count, they already know that whether this is useful for them or not. So in this way, we are creating a central repository for storing everything together. Now here I can just write the SQL. So I'm just going to say, so I can just do select gender count of gender from, and now here you see the magic. We can use ref keyword, we can use macros, we can use source, we can use all the DBT functionality that we have used till now in the analysis folder as well. And this functionality you might not get anywhere else. So DBT makes these things really easy for us. So what I can do is I can write here ref, and then I can employee features table over here. And as simple as this is how you just create your analysis query. This is the simple analysis that we want to do. That's why it's a simple query, but you can write complex SQLs as well, like I mentioned before. And then we can just write group by gender and save this. So as simple as this is our analysis query ready. This is what the stakeholder asked us. We wrote it in the analysis folder and done. Now the next question that might be coming to your mind is, how do we run this? How do we get the results? Because ultimately we have to give results to the stakeholder and not the query. So we don't have to run dbt run command here, because these analysis queries, they don't get materialized, they are not sent to the data warehouse, so we can't do dbt run. The thing is, we have to just do dbt compile, get the compiled code which is going to resolve these ref and other dbt functionality that we have used. So it's going to resolve that for us, and then we can take that functionality, take that compiled code, go into our warehouse and run it. Let me show this to you in action. So I'm going to do dbt compile. Always remember that you're in the dbt folder where your dbt_project.yaml file is present to run these commands. So dbt compile, and then I'm going to have a select flag so that I just run this particular query. So I'm doing -- select gender count, and now as soon as I've done that, in your target folder, an analysis folder will get created with the compiled version. We're getting some warnings, but that's fine. Let's go to our compiled folder, and in here you can see we have analysis. Earlier we just had models and tests, but now we have analysis as well. Let's click on this gender counts. So you see here dbt has given us all of this compiled code, and we can just run this. Now I'll go to my warehouse, create a new SQL file here, and I'm just going to paste that query and run it. As soon as we run it, we see male 882, female 588. We've got the answer. This was a simple query, so you might not have that aha moment. But if you have some complex queries which involves understanding the dependencies between multiple models and then giving the results to the stakeholder, that will make things more easier for us when using analysis query. Now, because we are using the dbt for power users extension, we can just run this over here. We don't have to go to our data warehouse to run this SQL. We can just run here and see the results over here. Oh, I think I selected that and it just ran that part. So you can see over here male 882 and female 588. So we are seeing the same results over here. So we don't have to leave our VS Code. We can see the results here itself and give it to the stakeholder. So you see the advantage that we are getting over here is we are able to use the dbt features like using ref keyword, macros, etc. We can see the dependencies as well. So if we look at the lineage over here, we should be able to see the lineage as well. So let me just do here. So you see, from gold employee features, we are getting gender count. So we are able to see the dependency properly. And we don't have to hard code any column names. As if you see here, we are in dev environment right now, so we are getting dev query. If we are in prod, then we will get prod queries. So we will have environment agnostic queries readily created for us. We don't have to keep changing these names manually when we switch the environments. This is a job that is done by DBT for us, and things are made easier for us using analysis folder. That's why it's highly recommended to use it. So the workflow for any query that is sitting in the analysis folder is, you get a question from the stakeholder, you convert that question into an SQL file, and you put this in the analysis folder. So this is an analysis. Then you will run dbt compile to compile this code and get a compiled query. Now this you will find in the target folder, in the dbt folder. And then you have two options. Either you use the dbt for power users extension in VS Code and run the query so that you see the results in VS Code, or you get the compiled query and then you just run it directly on the data warehouse. Now let us try to understand whether you should be creating something as a model or you should put this in the analysis folder. So when to use a model? When you are going to query something more regularly, then you can create it as a model, because then you can push this in your data warehouse and then you can decide whether to put it as a table or view depending on how fresh you want the data to be. And your stakeholders who are asking for this data can directly go and query it from there. You don't have to write the query again and again and then give the data to them. It becomes self-serve. Second is, when you're creating dashboards, they should be created from a model rather than something which is sitting in the analysis folder. Third is, when you need something to be properly tested and documented, then it seems that that should be created as a model, because it could be used in multiple places or is very important piece of information. So proper testing and documentation should be present. So should be created as a model. And if things are part of a pipeline, like model A goes to model B, uses in model C, so you have some kind of a pipeline, then those should be created as models, because then you can see the intermediate steps as well and you can see the intermediate data as well. Things that you should consider building as analysis queries is, when you're exploring the data, you're trying to find patterns, trends, or somebody is asking you questions and it's just a one-time question that they want to be answered, so you put those queries in the analysis folder. Another use case would be if there is a query which you have to run like once a year, so it's a very less frequently used query, so then you can put this in the analysis folder so that you have the query ready, and whenever the stakeholder asks, you just have to run it. You don't have to store this as a separate model in your data warehouse. Then if you're not sure if this would be used in long term, then you can create those things as analysis queries. You can do those ad hoc queries when the stakeholders require, and if things become more frequent, then you can just push these as models into your data warehouse. So I hope this helps you understand whether you should be creating particular thing as a model or as an analysis query. I would also like to explain some advanced patterns that you can use or you can perform using analysis. So the first thing is, you can use ref and source keywords. I've already mentioned this before. Anything that you can use for models, you can use in these analysis queries as well. So in a similar way, because you can use Jinja templates in the models, similar way you can use Jinja templates for your queries in the analysis folder as well. This helps you parameterize things, and you don't have to change multiple things at multiple places. You just change the variable using Jinja and things would work out for you. The next is using macros. This is one of the most important things, as you can use macros, so you can write some reusable logic in macros, you can reference it over there, or some complex logic that you have already built as part of your pipeline, you can reference that as well in these particular queries. So this use of macros in the analysis queries makes it really powerful. One of the most common patterns for which analysis queries is used for is the data validation. So like if you want to compare the old pipeline versus new pipeline stuff, or you want to detect any anomalies, or you want to just ensure that the aggregates of the old pipeline or the new pipeline or some stuff that you have done, they remain same, then it is good to have good to create these analysis queries so that you can keep track, and whenever you're doing any future work on the pipeline, you have these query sets available and you can just run and debug or validate data from there. Now let us jump to a real world workflow. So suppose that there is a stakeholder who has asked you a question. What you do is you just go and create a query in the analysis folder, give them the results. And if you find something useful in it that could be used widely or different people could benefit from it, it would be good to share results. So what you do is you convert it into a model so that other stakeholders can again, or the same stakeholder can again query it automatically like a self-serve analytics. You don't have to query and give the data set to them again and again. And then you can add tests and documentation on top of this to ensure that your model stays accurate all the time. So this is how the real world workflow works. It usually starts with a question, goes into creating an analysis query, and then finally ends up being a model if it is useful. Now the last thing that I would like to cover is the common pitfalls. So the number one mistake that can happen is using analysis as a permanent solution. Like I said previously, that if it is helpful to be if it will be helpful to share it with the other stakeholders, like in the wider audience, then it is always good practice to convert this analysis query into a model so that the insights can be used by multiple teams or multiple people. Second is hard coding table names. Sometimes when you're in dev environment, other times you're in prod environment, sometimes you have to query dev stuff, other times you have to query prod stuff. If you keep on hard coding the table names or the schema names, etc., then it would always be up to you to figure out whether you want to query prod or dev, and you have to make those changes manually. However, if you use the ref keyword, let's say, so DBT will know that if you are in the dev environment, it will give you the database name, schema name, table name as per dev environment. If you are in prod, it will give you this as per prod. So ref keyword makes things really easy and I find it very handy. Third is inconsistent naming convention. Like it is important to have proper naming conventions for models, it is equally important to have these kind of naming conventions for analysis as well, because ultimately these queries we want other members of our team or other stakeholders who can come into this place, find whatever they're looking for and query it directly. So if the naming convention is easy and is consistent, then it makes things easier and they don't have to come to you asking whether this query exists or not. They can see things through from the name itself. It's highly recommended that you add comments to your analysis query, because when you add comments, you can add things like why it is used for, what's the grain, what's the purpose, and you can list what you have done over there so that if somebody else wants to query such data, then they can come to your query and see if they can use it as it is or what tweaks they have to make on top of your query for them to work. So comments makes things easier because it helps them understand why you wrote this particular piece of code. Next is skipping version control. These queries, like the analysis folder, it should be version controlled so that you can keep track of how the query has evolved over time. And lastly, if you're adding any complex logic, like it is for models, you break it down into multiple models and reference those models. Similarly for analysis also, if there is going to be a very big query with lots of CTEs, then it is recommended that you break down that particular CTE into multiple analysis queries, because first it makes things easier, makes things readable and maintainable, and also it helps in reusing. You might be using those CTEs in other places as well, so if you already have picked it out of that query and put it in a separate query, then it makes things more reusable. And like I was mentioning previously, if you feel that a particular query which is sitting in your analysis folder is being queried frequently or is being asked frequently, then you convert this into a model rather than keeping this as a separate analysis query. That's it for this particular video. If you found this helpful, then please do subscribe to my channel. And as always, if you have any questions, then please put them in the comments below. I promise to get back to you. Thank you for watching. I will see you in my next one.